highway. Truck driver sees them. I am a truck driver, and a few years ago, I kept seeing strange people standing along the highway. Actually, they were always in the woodline along the road. They stood with their backs towards the road at a 45-degree angle. I could see a profile of their faces. They stood perfectly still. At first, I thought they were protesting something, but when I asked other drivers if they had seen them, they all said, "No. I have not seen any people like this in a few years, and have always wondered if there was something strange about them." The figure. Roadside visitor with packages sprints toward. On Christmas night, 1999, we were driving home from a party. It was about 10 o'clock when we were pulling onto our road, as a figure wearing a long gown and carrying boxes suddenly sprinted towards the truck. Dropping the boxes it was carrying, it jumped in front of us. As we drove by, it went through the truck. As we got home, we weren't sure if we saw it or not, so we went back. There wasn't any boxes or sign of it being there. When my dad went back to work, he told his friends what we had seen. One of his friends said he saw the same thing 2 hours earlier on that same road. Encounter with an unknown entity. Something dark came with a warning and left my friends scarred for life. I am writing about this for the first time. It has been 23 years ago, and I have never spoken of it before. I was reading some of the accounts on your site. I thought this may be the time to write about this event so that I can bury it, so to speak. In 1984, I was 22 years old. I had moved in with my best friend Justin, and we shared the expense of his mobile home. We did not rent the mobile home, as it was a used unit that Justin purchased. He and I spent most of our free time partying with as many girls as we could. The typical bachelor pad would best describe our home. Although it was just a temporary place to live, we still called it home. We had lived there about 6 months when strange things began to happen. Justin and I were folding clothes in the master bedroom. It was about 6 p.m. on a Thursday evening, and everything was normal. We had the stereo on and were playing albums. My stereo was a Monteverdi system, which had a mute button on the front. It was a large square button, which when pressed in, locked it into mute mode. In the middle of a song, the house went quiet. We looked at each other and began to walk down the hallway to the living room. When we looked at the stereo to determine what had happened, we saw that the mute button had been pressed in and locked into place. We both just looked at each other, because we were both together when this happened, and the doors to the outside were locked. We released the mute button and went on about our evening. A few days later, things began to happen that had never happened before. Dishes, pots, pans, and glasses would start rattling in the kitchen. They made enough noise that it drowned out the TV. It sounded like someone was having a fight with our dishes. We would walk into the kitchen, and as soon as we stepped in the room, the noise would stop. This occurred almost every night thereafter, even when we had friends over. Most of our friends, except those who were too scared, tried to sneak into the kitchen to catch a glimpse of the noisemaker. As soon as someone went into the kitchen, the noise would stop. As the weeks rolled on, things started to escalate. One night I was dozing off to sleep, and I heard the sound of crystal, as if someone was ringing a crystal bell. I stepped out of bed, and the noise stopped. This continued each night, at exactly the stroke of midnight. Justin worked third shift, thus I was alone in the house most nights from 10:30 until I left for work in the morning. After about 2 weeks of this, I had gotten used to the sound and gave up trying to find the source. Then the worst haunting occurred. I was drifting off to sleep, and I heard the crystal again. I opened my eyes, and standing at the foot of the bed was a figure of an entity. It was so black, blacker than pitch black. I slept with no lights on in the house, Even the outside lights had to be turned off. Yet, this entity, which stood at the foot of my bed, was blacker than the darkness in the room. It had the shape of a person dressed in a hooded robe. It began to stretch its hand out to me. Actually, as the figure was so dark, all I could see was an arm. I sat up in the bed, but it did not disappear as one might expect. I sat there frozen in fear. I could feel the presence of this entity so strongly that all I could say was, "In the name of Jesus, I rebuke you." You must understand that although I have a Christian background, at that time I was a partier and was not a person you would describe as a Christian. Yet from somewhere deep within me, these words came out. As soon as I spoke them, it disappeared, but not before I heard, "Death is very close." I heard this, I think more in my mind than with my natural ears. Again, it scared me so bad, I had to get up and make me a drink to calm my nerves. A few weeks later, my friends and I were on our way to a bonfire campout. We had planned this outing all summer, and we had found a perfect spot on a friend's land. On the first evening of the outing, tragedy struck. My friends, Justin and Scott, collided head-on while riding trail bikes. Justin lost use of his arm permanently, and Scott was in the hospital 4 months. They both lived, but to this day, they carry the scars of that evening in the arm that is no longer functioning, and in a knee and hip that requires braces. I have read that similar encounters have resulted in some kind of warning to help prevent tragedy. I do not believe this was the intention in this case. I never felt anything good during this whole ordeal, but rather I felt that something had set out to harm us. The next day after the accident, I moved out. I never went back, and I have never experienced a haunting since. All I can say is that even though no one died, 2 very close friends live with permanent scars due to the accident. Little girl. A ghostly girl smiled the night my father died. I'm Julia from Sydney, Australia, and I have a very disturbing story to tell you. When I was 7, I was in bed reading when I saw something out the corner of my eye. So I looked up and saw a little girl standing in my doorway with very pale skin that was transparent. She had white robes on and had a very sad look about her. We looked at each other for like a minute. Then she vanished. I didn't see her again until I was 10. My father had died that day from what the doctors called heart failure. As I was in bed, all warm, cozy, and about to drift to sleep, I saw her again in my doorway. But this time, she didn't look sad, she looked happy. This, my eyes told me this, was not a good smile she had on her face, but a wicked, evil smile. Mom sent me to what she called a thinker helper, a psychologist, because she thought that I was making up the little girl's story for attention. I haven't told anyone else about the little girl since, because I know not many people will believe me. Twin sister. My twin kept her promise. She stayed 29, even in the afterlife. My name is Gina, and I have a twin sister whom passed away 1 year ago on September 11th. Tina died 2 days after our 29th birthday. During our adult years, she always joked about not ever turning 30 years old. This was all before we knew about her sickness. In the past year, I had extreme difficulty with our birthday coming up because it would be the first one without her, and I would be turning 30. We would laugh continuously about this. Neither one of us wanted to turn 30, and I told her before she passed that I was staying at 29 forever. Well, on our birthday this year, I had a hard day dealing with being without her for the first time on our birthday. I had been in a very depressed state all day. Later that night, I had gone outside to get some fresh air. I have a blazer that I put the tailgate down on and was sitting, just thinking about the last year. I caught a slight fragrance of what I thought was the body spray my sister wore. but I thought it was my wishful thinking because my other siblings said that they had felt her presence, and I never had. Well, a few minutes later, the fragrance was stronger. Then I started laughing so hard, I could hardly catch my breath. All of a sudden, I had the strongest sense of my twin laughing at me because I had just turned 30 and she was still 29. I have had other connections with her since then, but this was the most important one, as it was her first visit with me, and it was our birthday. I know this is not a scary ghost story, but for me, it was very important in the closure of her death. I know she is still with us. My nephew, who is only 3, has made little comments like, "Hi, TT," and "I love you, TT." TT is what all the kids in our family had called Tina. It is strange, too, because he could barely speak when she died and was never really around her. So it caught us off guard on Thanksgiving when he was running through the kitchen and stopped in his tracks, had a big smile on his face, and blurted it out. "We all know she is with us now. You have to believe to see." Not all visitors from the other side come to scare. Like this video if you believe. Subscribe for more true stories. And tell us your experience in the comments.